Hello, my name is Jiang, and I'm a 16-year-old violinist from Michigan. In this video, I will be talking about vibrato and sharing some tips to practice for control and comfort. So let's start with step 1. What exactly is vibrato? Most people can guess that vibrato is the back and forth movement around a pitch, but it's actually a little more specific than that. Vibrato is actually built off of two components, the upper bound and the lower bound, both of which remain unchanging. What this means is that the highest point of your vibrato will always be the actual pitch on the page, and the lowest point will be just under that. You can practice this as a half step lower, but it doesn't usually fall that far when you're playing. So for example, if I'm going to practice vibrating the note D, the highest point of my vibrato is going to be a purely pitched D. And the lowest point is going to be just under that note. The ideal vibrato moves like a wave, constantly fluctuating between the highest and lowest points without stopping, slowing, or speeding up. You also want to keep in mind that your vibrato should be hitting the same high and low points so that your intonation stays steady. So this brings me to step 2, practicing your vibrato slowly with metronome and counting. A good place to start is to practice your vibrato extremely slow, keeping in mind the two principles that your vibrato should A, stay in motion, and B, reach the same high and low point every time. So going on from there, you can also practice your vibrato with acceleration. I like to count my vibrations by repetition, with each repetition representing 1 up and 1 down. So 2 would sound like. Setting your metronome at about 50 or 60, you can count your repetitions and accelerate just like you would if you were practicing scales. You can repeat this exercise on different strings and positions, and make sure to hit all 4 fingers. There's 2 really important things to keep in mind. The first is that practicing vibrato fast and practicing vibrato slow are equally important. So don't skip over any tempos because you think they're impractically slow. The second thing to keep in mind is that relaxation is key. And if you find your hand tightening up, a good thing to do is to practice your vibrato with a light or ghost touch, as if you were playing a harmonic. This forces your hand to stay relaxed. This brings me to step 3, incorporating your vibrato into your technique practice. Now is a good time to sidebar and say that you should be practicing your technique without vibrato as well, because it helps you listen for pitch, clarity, and to focus on the bow. But when you're practicing with technique, a great place to start is with scales and arpeggios. The key thing to keep in mind is to make sure that your vibrato stays consistent and even while you're changing fingers, strings, and even positions. You can apply the same ideas to your shifting etudes. Now the last thing is to not be afraid to make it hard on yourself. Making your technique practice purposefully difficult or awkward helps you to have a stronger and more secure grasp on the concept and make it easier for yourself down the line in repertoire. One of my favorite ways to do this is by practicing vibrating my fifths. Well, we all know that fifths can be extremely awkward for the left hand, but adding a little bit of vibrato can actually help to center the pitch, and it also forces your left hand to find the perfect angle to pull off the vibrations. Another one of my favorite ways to challenge myself is to practice high-speed fourth finger vibrato on a high string in a high position. Although this seems extremely difficult, it's a great exercise for building strength and comfort in awkward positions. This brings me to our last step, incorporating your vibrato into your repertoire. Vibrato is a great tool for building tone and mood in your playing. For example, in slower pieces, you might want to air for a warmer vibrato, which means wider with less speed. On the flip side, with more dramatic pieces like concerti, you might decide you want vibrato with more speed. On some occasions, you might want to start a piece or phrase with no vibrato. This allows room to grow down the line. A great example for violinists is Bruch Concerto No. 1. Finally, in fast passagework sections, it becomes impossible to do a full vibrato in your left hand on every note. But a really good way to think about it is to keep a hum of energy in your left hand, and also to pick out certain notes that you want to bring out of the phrase with special attention in vibrato. Alright, thank you so much for watching today. I hope this was helpful and you learned something about vibrato. Happy practicing!